Hi, my name's James and this is Other Pixel Games. This year I took part in my very first solo game jam with the GMTK Game Jam. At this point, GMTK is pretty famous within the game development circles, and if you're watching this, there's a good chance you're a part of that. But on the off chance you're not, the GMTK Game Jam is a yearly event where people have 96 hours to make a game inspired by a theme that's announced at the start of the jam. It's hosted by a YouTube channel called the Game Maker's Toolkit, hence GMTK Game Jam. I took part in this jam with a few of my fellow unemployed Roll7 teammates last year with the theme Built to Scale, and had a lot of fun. Though we didn't take it too seriously, just throwing in whatever with a very silly game about stacking lads on top of each other called Lads, Lads, Lads. This year though, I decided to do it alone. Partly because I knew that if I worked with other team members, I'd allow them to solve problems, and for the most part they would likely be the ones coding. Or if I was the one coding, then I'd be holding them back with my basic coding ability. I went into this jam because I wanted to keep learning. I was talking with my cousin recently about my inability to learn code in the first year I was trying, and he said something that resonated with me in my struggle. To paraphrase and perhaps elaborate, he said, "You learn through repetition, so if you follow tutorials once and build a thing, you might have one thing but not the knowledge of how to make it." So I thought that doing a game jam, even if I wanted to make a small, unpolished game, would ultimately be a really good way to not only get that repetition, but also to verify and build on the skills that I've built. Quick side note, when I did this game jam, I credit myself with having started to learn to code properly less than 3 weeks earlier, so if you're expecting the next great indie masterpiece, please lower your expectations. It lasted 96 hours and I had 2.5 weeks real coding experience behind me, so how did it go? Day 1 of the jam was an interesting day for me, to say the least. We couldn't start until 6 PM UK time because that was when GMTK announced the theme, and that day I was incredibly off and on about the idea of participating. I was thinking that I had too little experience, I was thinking that it would be a great learning opportunity, I was thinking that I already had a lot going on, maybe I would, maybe I wouldn't. I was also very busy that day because it was my girlfriend's citizenship ceremony. In the end, I decided not to do it. Clearly though, that decision didn't stick because there's still most of this video left to go, so what happened? Well, I'd been waiting 5 weeks to hear back about a job I'd been interviewing for. It had been an incredibly strange process, so while in normal times I'd just have assumed that I didn't get it and they'd ghosted me, I had received an email after nagging a friend who worked there that said that the process was ongoing and I hadn't been rejected yet. Why is this relevant? Well, immediately after dropping off my girlfriend, I checked my phone and there it was. The rejection. That of course bummed me out, but on the way home I remembered the game jam, and the theme was about to be revealed. I still wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, but I decided that I'd look at the theme, and if I had an idea by the time I got home, I'd do it. If not, then no bother. So the theme came out and loops. The theme was loops. They suggested racetracks, looping code, loop-de-loops and repeated actions, but they also say that you're open to interpret the theme however you want. Which is good, because arguably my idea was none of that. My idea, as you'll see, was to create a puzzle game where the player interacts with the looping world to change things and ultimately complete a goal. Idea in hand, I found that I was committed to complete the GMTK 2025 Game Jam. I rushed home, making sure to get my 10k steps in on the way, and sat down at my computer with a Miro board to plot out what I wanted to do. I had a good idea in my head of what the game would be, so I took some time to write out the things that I needed and the rough order that I needed to do them in. I needed a character, a level that loops back on itself. I needed to create a logic system that said what the level looked like each time it loaded. I needed a level complete screen, a menu, I needed the puzzle level, and I needed audio. With that all decided and plotted out, I was ready to call it for the night, but before I did, I took a moment to create a basic character controller, and then another few moments to find character art on the Unity asset store and hook up all its animations. With that done and a solid start ready, I went to bed. Day 2, I wanted to get the bulk of the mechanics implemented, which meant the character needed to be able to interact with the things, I needed the looping level, I needed the logic for making changes to the world, and I wanted to get the main menu in. There was some stuff I got in, no problem. I knew how I wanted the level looping to work. Whenever the player went off the screen, they'd just teleport to the other side. The interaction system I stole from my main project, but there were a few things that were new to me. I mostly worked from tutorials for things I didn't understand, like the main menu, but there were some things like the logic system that I didn't even know how to ask for. I didn't want to have the code handed to me, but I did need someone to tell me the tools I needed. Thankfully, I have people around me who do this for a living. So very quickly I got to grips with lists and searching the scene for things like interfaces. At the end of the first day, things were moving quickly. I'd got everything I wanted into the game, and I even had a test level that would eventually become the level for every one of my puzzles. When day 3 rolled around, well, the reason I needed to get all the logic done on day 2 was because I was going to be out most of day 3. A friend of mine had invited me over, I hadn't seen him in a while. Did I really have a choice? Anyway, I had a little time in the evening, so I made sure that the loop of the game was closed. I settled on the objective being opening the door in the starting loop of the game so that you could leave, and created a level complete window. I also made the decision that it was going to be a level based game, meaning that I'd need a level select. I also realised that there was a lot of polish I could do. I realised that the player character needed to be recoloured because they blended in with the background, and I thought up a few more things that would make the game just a little bit better. But I was very tired after socialising, so I went back to Miro, added all the new things to the list, and made that tomorrow's problem. Day 4. The Saturday was the last full day we had to make our games. I had nothing planned, so other than a long walk to keep my steps up, I planned to spend the whole day working. I started the day in a cafe coding the level select screen and the ability to unlock levels. It took me a little longer than I wanted, but I had it done by lunchtime, leaving me all afternoon to build levels. I had the plan to make 9 levels, but after running out of ideas at level 5, I decided that 6 would be plenty. It is, after all, only a small game built in 96 hours. At this point, with only 1 day left, I had an entire working game. There were still a few things I could polish and add to make it easier to use, but at this point I could release it and it would be fine. At least, that's what I thought until I recorded an update for my friends and found a game-breaking softlock. But that was tomorrow's problem. With only about 11 hours until submission, yes, I woke up around 7 on a Sunday, I got immediately to work fixing the bugs. The softlock was a quick fix. I was checking if a file existed rather than if the ball on it was true, and the pause system, which was half finished, was fixed up right quick. I also noticed the main menu buttons were misaligned, making it easy to accidentally quit, but since I was planning to upload it to a browser and that functionality wouldn't work anyway, I just deleted the button. I got a controls tutorial in that broke the character controller when I tried to make it stop showing after you started to move. Rather than trying again, I just left the controls on screen for the whole first level. I spent the rest of the day until lunch adding sounds for interacting, unlocking the level exit, completing the game, as well as some aesthetic ones like background music, footsteps and water. By this point I was kind of ready for the jam to be over, so I checked what I had left on my list and triaged what was needed. I'd already decided to cancel 3 levels and cancelled the story, so I was almost done. But considering the insane way I built the levels, I chose not to give each area its own environment and instead focused on some of the final touches, like swapping out the player colours for blue and A-Sprite and adding some minor details for legibility, like the pause button that turns into a play button and arrows on the side of the screen. So with about 6 hours to spare and coming up to lunch, I submitted the game, opened it up in Browser and immediately discovered that the UI was busted because the resolution was different. I've worked on UI before on tons of projects and it's always worked, but it's also originally been set up by someone else and tweaked by me. Whatever I did differently, ouch, not good. With some quick Google help I found a workaround by setting a screen size in the itch.io browser and mimicking that in game. It required me to reformat all the UI I'd done in the game, but it was done. So with about 5 hours left, I submitted it again and found that half the pause menu buttons were broken, leading to a softlock. This happened at least once more before finally, with 4 hours and 5 minutes left, they gave an extension later so that became 5 hours and 5 minutes, I uploaded it and submitted it to the Game Jam, ready to move on and relax. Once the jam's complete, there's a week of voting during which thousands of people rate the games on 5 categories: creativity, enjoyment, narrative, artwork and audio. So how did I do? Did I come first and wow the competition? No. Did I show up in the video? Of course I didn't. Are you crazy? My game got a very middle of the road response, placing between 4,000 and 5,000 in each category out of 9,639 entries. With creativity, art and audio, I got better than 4,500. And I'm totally fine with that. I basically started learning to code 3 weeks earlier. I'd have been shocked if I'd gotten any better. So how do I feel about it all? I had a lot of fun and I learned a lot, but I think my main takeaway is that I should do more game jams. Not like one a month, they do take a lot out of you, but doing them more than once a year, I can 100% see them helping me to advance in my code skills way more than just working on a single project. As I said earlier, you learn through repetition, and jumping into game jams more often will give me that repetition. In fact, assuming I don't have anything else going on, I think I'm probably going to sign up to Scream Jam 2025 in 2 months. Did you take part in the GMTK Game Jam? If so, how did you do? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.